There is an island in the western Pacific Ocean, so remote, so far removed from the major shipping lanes and flight paths of the modern world, that for most of human history it existed in a kind of quiet anonymity, known only to the people who lived on it, and the birds that nested in its forests. The island is part of Palau, a small archipelago of roughly 340 islands, scattered across the warm tropical waters between the Philippines and Papua New Guinea. Most of these islands are uninhabited, many a little more than jagged limestone formations rising from the sea covered in dense jungle and surrounded by reefs so pristine they look like they belong in a painting rather than on a real map. But one of these islands holds something inside it that exists nowhere else on the entire planet, something so strange, so beautiful and so scientifically extraordinary that when the first outside researchers encountered it, they could barely process what they were seeing. Hidden in the interior of a small rocky island called Ale Molk, surrounded on all sides by dense jungle and limestone cliffs, accessible only through a narrow trail that winds through the forest and then drops sharply down to the water's edge, there is a lake. It is not a large lake. It measures roughly 460 meters long and 160 meters wide. From above it looks like a jewel set into the green landscape, a pool of emerald water glowing in the tropical sun. But the water is not empty. It is filled with jellyfish, millions of them. Golden, pulsing, translucent creatures ranging in size from a marble to a basketball drifting through the water in vast swirling clouds, so dense that in some places you cannot see more than a few feet in front of you. They fill the lake from surface to just above the bottom layer. They move together in coordinated migrations that follow the arc of the sun across the sky, and they cannot sting you. 5 million jellyfish, and not one of them can cause you any pain at all. They lost that ability thousands of years ago, and the story of how and why that happened is one of the most remarkable tales of evolution, isolation, and adaptation that the natural world has ever produced. To understand how Jellyfish Lake came to exist, you have to go back approximately 12,000 years to the end of the last ice age. During the Pleistocene epoch, when massive ice sheets covered much of the northern hemisphere and sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today, the islands of Palau looked very different. The limestone formations that make up the rock islands as they are known today were not islands at all. They were the tops of a large limestone plateau connected to each other and to the surrounding landmass by dry ground. The area that would eventually become Jellyfish Lake was a depression in this limestone plateau, a low point in the terrain surrounded by higher ridges of rock. As the Ice Age ended and global temperatures began to rise, the vast ice sheets covering North America, Europe, and Asia started to melt. Sea levels rose dramatically over the course of several thousand years. Water crept higher and higher across the limestone plateau, filling every crack, every crevice, every depression it could find. The low point that would become Jellyfish Lake was gradually flooded by seawater seeping through tiny fissures and porous channels in the surrounding limestone. The lake filled slowly over centuries, becoming a body of water connected to the ocean, not through any open channel or river, but through millions of microscopic tunnels in the rock itself. Water could move through these tunnels, but only slowly, very slowly. Small dissolved molecules and ions could pass through. Bacteria and microscopic organisms could be carried in. But larger organisms could not. Fish could not enter. Sea turtles could not enter. Large predators of any kind could not enter. The lake became a closed system, a world apart, connected to the ocean in the most tenuous and limited way imaginable, and trapped inside it on the day the water level rose high enough to seal the basin was a population of spotted jellyfish. Mastigius papua, common throughout the tropical Pacific, unremarkable in the open ocean where they lived alongside predators, parasites, and all the other forces that shape life in the sea. But in this lake, they were suddenly alone. Cut off from the open ocean, cut off from their predators, cut off from the genetic flow of the broader jellyfish population. And that isolation would change them in ways that no one could have predicted. The species of jellyfish that became trapped in the lake roughly 12,000 years ago was Mastigius papua, a medium-sized jellyfish found throughout the Indo-Pacific region. In the open ocean, Mastigius papua has a functional sting. It is not a powerful sting by jellyfish standards. It is not the kind of sting that sends people to the hospital or makes headlines on the evening news, but it is a real sting delivered by specialized cells called cnidocytes that line the jellyfish tentacles and oral arms. Each cnidocyte contains a tiny capsule called a nematocyst, which is essentially a microscopic harpoon coiled under pressure and ready to fire at the slightest contact. When a prey item or a potential threat brushes against the tentacle, the nematocyst discharges in one of the fastest mechanical actions in the entire biological world. The barbed tip penetrates the target and injects a cocktail of toxins designed to paralyze small prey and deter larger predators. In the open ocean, this mechanism serves two critical functions. First, it allows the jellyfish to capture food, small zooplankton, copepods, fish larvae, and other tiny organisms that blunder into the tentacles are stung, immobilized, and then transported to the jellyfish mouth for digestion. Second, it provides defense. Fish and sea turtles are major predators of jellyfish in the open ocean, and while a jellyfish sting may not kill a large predator, it can certainly discourage one. The sting is a survival tool refined over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Jellyfish are among the oldest multicellular animals on Earth, with a fossil record stretching back over 500 million years. The cnidocyte, the nematocyst, the sting, these are ancient technologies. They've been working effectively since before fish existed, before vertebrates of any kind existed. They are older than bones, older than eyes, older than brains, and yet in Jellyfish Lake they began to disappear. The reason is as elegant as it is simple. When the jellyfish population became isolated in the lake, they found themselves in an environment that was radically different from the open ocean in one crucial respect. There were no predators. No fish large enough to eat them had made it into the lake before it sealed. No sea turtles. No larger jellyfish species that might compete with them. The lake was a predator-free zone, and it would remain that way for thousands of years. In the open ocean, a jellyfish that lost its sting would be at a severe disadvantage. It would be eaten more readily. It would capture less food. It would leave fewer offspring. Natural selection would ruthlessly eliminate any mutation that weakened the stinging apparatus, because in the open ocean the sting is essential for survival. But in the lake the calculus was completely different. Without predators to defend against, the defensive function of the sting became irrelevant, and the food capture function became less important too, for reasons we will explore in a moment. With no selective pressure to maintain the sting, mutations that reduced the size or effectiveness of the nematocysts were no longer punished by natural selection. Jellyfish carrying these mutations survived just as well as those with fully functional stings. They reproduced just as successfully. Their genes passed to the next generation at the same rate, and over thousands of years, over countless generations of jellyfish living and reproducing and dying in this isolated lake, the sting gradually faded. The nematocysts became smaller. The toxins became weaker. The cnidocytes became less numerous. The process was not instantaneous. It was not dramatic. It was the slow, quiet, inevitable erosion of a trait that was no longer needed. Evolution does not maintain expensive biological machinery for free. Building and loading nematocysts costs energy. Producing toxins costs energy. If that energy expenditure provides no survival benefit, then individuals who spend less energy on it have more energy available for growth and reproduction. Over time, those individuals come to dominate the population. The sting does not disappear because of some deliberate process. It disappears because there is no longer any reason to keep it. The golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake did not decide to become harmless. They simply drifted in that direction one generation at a time, carried by the blind, relentless logic of natural selection operating in a world without predators. Today, the sting of the golden jellyfish is so reduced that it is essentially undetectable to humans. Swimmers who enter the lake and allow the jellyfish to bump against their skin feel nothing. No pain, no irritation, no tingling. The nematocysts still exist in a vestigial form, but they are too small and too weak to penetrate human skin. Some researchers believe they may still be marginally effective against very small, very thin-skinned organisms like tiny zooplankton, but even this is debated. For all practical purposes, the golden jellyfish of Palau has lost its sting entirely. It is a jellyfish that cannot sting, a predator that has forgotten how to hunt. A creature defined for 500 million years by one of the most sophisticated weapons in the animal kingdom that simply let that weapon rust away because it no longer needed it. There is something almost poignant about that, something that speaks to the way evolution works, not as a ladder of progress always building, always improving, but as a river flowing downhill, following the path of least resistance, abandoning whatever is not needed, keeping only what works right now in this place, in this moment. But the loss of the sting is only half the story, because when the jellyfish lost their primary means of capturing food, they did not starve. They had a backup system. And this backup system is so extraordinary, so beautifully adapted to the conditions inside the lake, that it has become the defining feature of the golden jellyfish and the key to understanding their entire way of life. Living inside the tissues of every golden jellyfish in Jellyfish Lake are millions of microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. These are single-celled photosynthetic organisms similar to the zooxanthellae found in coral reefs around the world. They live inside the jellyfish cells in a symbiotic relationship that benefits both partners. The zooxanthellae get a safe place to live, protected from the open water and provided with carbon dioxide and nutrients by the jellyfish metabolism. In return, the zooxanthellae do what all photosynthetic organisms do. They capture sunlight and convert it into energy in the form of sugars and other organic compounds, and they share a significant portion of that energy with their jellyfish host. The golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake are essentially solar-powered animals. They carry their own internal food factories, and all those factories need to operate is sunlight. This is why the daily migration of the golden jellyfish is so important and so mesmerizing to witness. Every single day, without exception, the entire population of jellyfish in the lake performs a synchronized migration that follows the path of the sun across the sky. It begins at dawn. As the first light of morning hits the eastern side of the lake, the jellyfish begin to move. Millions of them pulsing gently through the water, drifting eastward toward the light. They are not swimming in the way that fish swim. Jellyfish locomotion is a simple rhythmic contraction of the bell that pushes water out behind them and propels them forward. It is not fast, it is not powerful, but it is persistent, and when 5 million animals are doing it simultaneously, the effect is like watching a living current flow through the lake. As the morning progresses and the sun climbs higher, the jellyfish continue to track it, moving across the lake in a broad, slow wave. By midday, when the sun is directly overhead, the jellyfish are concentrated in the center and western portions of the lake, maximizing their exposure to direct sunlight. As the afternoon wears on and the sun moves toward the west, the jellyfish follow, shifting their position again to stay in the light. By evening, as the sun drops below the tree line and shadows creep across the lake's surface, the jellyfish begin to slow their horizontal migration and instead start to move vertically, descending deeper into the water column where they spend the night. The precision of this migration is remarkable. Researchers who have tracked the movement of individual jellyfish using underwater cameras and GPS-tagged floats have found that the jellyfish do not simply drift randomly toward the light. They actively navigate. They rotate their bodies so that their bells face the sun, maximizing the surface area exposed to light, and therefore maximizing the amount of energy their zooxanthellae can produce. They avoid the shadows cast by the trees along the lake perimeter because shadows reduce the light available to their algae. They maintain a consistent distance from the edges of the lake, never venturing into the narrow channels and shallow areas near the shore. And they do all of this without a brain. Jellyfish do not have a central nervous system. They have a distributed network of nerve cells called a nerve net that allows them to sense light, gravity, and chemical gradients in the water. But they have no brain, no centralized processing center, no organ that could be described as thinking in any meaningful sense. Yet they navigate with purpose. They respond to changing conditions. They coordinate their movements with millions of other individuals to produce a migration that is so regular, so predictable, that you can set your watch by it. It is behavior driven not by thought, but by stimulus and response refined over thousands of generations of natural selection in a lake where following the sun was the single most important thing a jellyfish could do to survive. The vertical migration that occurs at night serves a different but equally important purpose. While the jellyfish spend their days at the surface soaking up sunlight for their zooxanthellae, they spend their nights descending to deeper layers of the lake where the water is richer in dissolved nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus. These nutrients are essential for the zooxanthellae to grow and reproduce. By moving between the sunlit surface during the day and the nutrient-rich depths at night, the jellyfish are essentially farming their algae, providing them with light when it is available and fertilizer when it is not. The entire daily cycle of the golden jellyfish is organized around the needs of their microscopic tenants. They are not just animals carrying algae, they are mobile greenhouses actively transporting their crops between the resources they need to thrive. The relationship between the jellyfish and their zooxanthellae is so deeply integrated, so mutually dependent, that it is difficult to say where the animal ends and the algae begins. They are two organisms functioning as one. a partnership that has been refined and optimized by 12,000 years of evolution in isolation. There is another aspect of Jellyfish Lake that most visitors never see, and that many people do not know about. The lake is meromictic, which means that its water column is permanently stratified into layers that do not mix. The upper layer of the lake, roughly the top 15 meters, is oxygenated. It is where the jellyfish live, where sunlight penetrates, where the normal biological processes of photosynthesis and respiration operate. But below that upper layer there is a boundary called the chemocline, where conditions change abruptly and dramatically. Below the chemocline the water is anoxic, meaning it contains no dissolved oxygen. It is also saturated with hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas produced by anaerobic bacteria that thrive in the oxygen-free depths. The hydrogen sulfide concentration below the chemocline is so high that it is lethal to virtually all aerobic organisms, including humans. Divers who have descended below the chemocline in the early days of exploration, before the dangers were fully understood, experienced dizziness, disorientation, and in some cases serious medical emergencies from absorbing hydrogen sulfide through their skin. The lake authorities now prohibit scuba diving in Jellyfish Lake entirely. Snorkeling is permitted, but diving is not. This is partly to protect the jellyfish from the disturbance caused by scuba bubbles, but it is also to protect the divers themselves from the toxic lower layer of the lake. The jellyfish know instinctively to avoid the chemocline. Their vertical migrations never take them below it. They descend at night to the nutrient-rich water just above the boundary, and then rise again at dawn. They have been navigating this invisible line between life and death for thousands of years, with a precision that suggests the ability to detect the chemical gradient through their nerve net, sensing the change in water chemistry and turning back before they cross into the killing zone. The hydrogen sulfide layer is not just a hazard, it is also a crucial part of the lake's ecosystem. The anaerobic bacteria living below the chemocline play a vital role in nutrient cycling, breaking down organic material that sinks from the upper layer and releasing dissolved nutrients back into the water. These nutrients eventually make their way upward through the chemocline in small quantities, providing the nitrogen and phosphorus that the jellyfish zooxanthellae need to survive. The toxic depths of the lake are paradoxically essential to the health of the ecosystem above. Without the anaerobic decomposition occurring in the lower layer, the nutrient supply to the upper layer would eventually be depleted, and the jellyfish population would decline. The entire system is a delicately balanced cycle of production and decomposition, light and darkness, oxygen and poison, with the jellyfish serving as the mobile link between the two worlds, carrying nutrients upward through their nightly vertical migration, and organic material downward when they die and sink to the bottom. In 1998, something happened that revealed just how delicate this balance truly is. A severe El Niño event caused water temperatures across the tropical Pacific to rise significantly. The effects were felt worldwide. Coral bleaching events devastated reefs in every ocean. Droughts struck regions that normally received abundant rainfall, and weather patterns were disrupted on a global scale. In Jellyfish Lake, the rising temperatures pushed the water above the thermal tolerance of the zooxanthellae living inside the jellyfish. Just as rising temperatures cause coral to expel their symbiotic algae in the bleaching events that have become all too familiar on the Great Barrier Reef, the golden jellyfish of jellyfish began to lose their zooxanthellae. Without their algal partners, the jellyfish could not produce enough energy to sustain themselves. The population crashed. By the end of 1998 and into 1990, the number of jellyfish in the lake had dropped dramatically. Some estimates suggested the population fell to near zero. The lake that had been filled with millions of pulsing golden creatures for thousands of years was suddenly almost empty. Snorkelers who visited during this period described an eerie experience swimming through water that should have been thick with jellyfish and finding almost nothing. The silence was unsettling. The absence was palpable. For a time it seemed possible that the golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake might be gone forever. But they were not gone. They were diminished but not extinct. A small remnant population survived the El Niño event, likely individuals that happened to harbor more heat-tolerant strains of zooxanthellae, or that were living in slightly cooler microhabitats within the lake. Over the following months and years, as water temperatures returned to normal, this remnant population began to recover. The jellyfish reproduced, their numbers grew. The zooxanthellae repopulated their tissues. The daily migration resumed. By the early 2000s, the population had rebounded significantly, though it took several more years to return to its pre-El Niño levels. The recovery was a testament to the resilience of the system, but it was also a warning. The golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake exist in a state of profound vulnerability. They are adapted to an extremely narrow range of conditions. They depend on a symbiotic partner that is sensitive to temperature changes of just a few degrees. They live in an isolated lake with no connection to any other population that could provide genetic reinforcement or recolonization if the local population were to be completely eliminated. They are an evolutionary masterpiece, but they are also an evolutionary dead end in the sense that they have nowhere else to go. If Jellyfish Lake becomes uninhabitable for them, there is no backup population, there is no second lake, there is no reserve. They exist here and only here, and if they disappear from this place, they disappear from the universe. This vulnerability was demonstrated again in 2016, when another significant population decline occurred. This time the cause was linked to a combination of factors including elevated water temperatures, drought conditions that reduced freshwater input to the lake, and possible changes in nutrient cycling. The jellyfish population dropped to extremely low levels, and Palau authorities made the difficult decision to close the lake to tourism temporarily. The closure was controversial because Jellyfish Lake is one of Palau's most important tourist attractions, generating significant revenue for the local economy. But the decision was made to prioritize the survival of the jellyfish over the short-term economic benefits of tourism. The lake remained closed for approximately a year and a half. When it reopened in 2018, the jellyfish population had recovered once again. Millions of golden jellyfish filled the water just as they had for thousands of years, pulsing through the sunlight following their ancient migration, tracking the arc of the sun with the same blind precision that had sustained them since the last ice age. The golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake are not the only inhabitants of this remarkable ecosystem. The lake also supports populations of a second jellyfish species, the moon jellyfish Aurelia aurita, which is found in oceans worldwide but has also undergone evolutionary changes during its isolation in the lake. There are several species of fish that manage to enter the lake through the limestone tunnels, including cardinal fish and gobies that have adapted to the unique conditions of the lake over thousands of years. There are sponges growing on the rocky walls of the lake and colonies of sea anemones and tunicates that filter organic particles from the water. There are crocodiles. Yes, actual saltwater crocodiles have been spotted in Jellyfish Lake, on rare occasions having navigated through the limestone channels that connect the lake to the surrounding lagoon. Their presence is uncommon, and they do not appear to be permanent residents. But the fact that they can access the lake at all is a reminder that the isolation of Jellyfish Lake, while profound, is not absolute. The limestone tunnels that connect it to the ocean are real physical pathways, and while they filter out most large organisms, they are not impenetrable barriers. What makes Jellyfish Lake so scientifically valuable is not just the jellyfish themselves, remarkable as they are. It is what the lake represents as a natural laboratory for studying evolution in isolation. Palau has not one but approximately 57 marine lakes scattered across its rock islands. Each lake was formed in the same way as Jellyfish Lake, by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, flooding limestone depressions and creating isolated bodies of water. Each lake trapped its own unique combination of organisms. Each lake has its own chemical profile, its own physical characteristics, its own set of environmental conditions. And in each lake the organisms that were trapped have been evolving independently for the same 12,000 years, diverging from their open ocean ancestors in ways that are unique to each specific environment. Some of these lakes contain jellyfish populations that have evolved differently from those in Jellyfish Lake. Some have lost their sting to a lesser degree. Some have different coloration or different body shapes. Some have different coloration or different body shapes. Some have different relationships with their zooxanthellae. By comparing the jellyfish populations across multiple marine lakes, researchers can study the process of evolution in real time, observing how the same ancestral species has diverged along different paths in different environments over the same time period. It is the equivalent of running the same experiment multiple times under slightly different conditions and comparing the results. For evolutionary biologists, it is an almost unparalleled opportunity. The parallels to other famous examples of evolution in isolation are striking and deliberate. The finches of the Galapagos Islands that inspired Darwin. The lemurs of Madagascar that diversified into dozens of species after being isolated on that island millions of years ago. The cichlid fish of the African Great Lakes that have produced hundreds of species from a single ancestral population in just a few million years. Jellyfish Lake and its sister lakes in Palau represent the same fundamental process playing out in miniature. Isolation removes the homogenizing effects of gene flow. Local conditions create new selective pressures. Organisms adapt to those local conditions over generations. Divergence accumulates. What was once a single population becomes something new, something unique, something that exists only in that one place and nowhere else. The golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake are not just a tourist attraction. They are a living demonstration of one of the most fundamental principles in all of biology. There is a deeper lesson embedded in the story of these jellyfish that extends beyond biology and evolution and into something more philosophical. The golden jellyfish lost their sting because they no longer needed it. They let go of their most ancient defense mechanism because the environment no longer demanded it. And in letting it go, they became something new, something gentler, something that could coexist with swimmers and snorkelers in a way that no other jellyfish species on Earth can. They became approachable, touchable, a wild animal that a human being can swim alongside without fear. There is a tendency in human thinking to equate survival with strength, with aggression, with the maintenance of ever more powerful defenses and weapons. The golden jellyfish suggest a different model. Sometimes survival means letting go of the weapons you no longer need. Sometimes the most successful adaptation is not to become harder or sharper or more dangerous, but to become softer, to redirect the energy you were spending on defense toward growth and reproduction and partnership. The jellyfish did not become weaker by losing their sting. They became more efficient. They became better adapted to the world they actually lived in rather than the world their ancestors had left behind. There is something in that worth thinking about. The experience of swimming in Jellyfish Lake is frequently described by those who have done it as one of the most surreal and emotionally moving experiences of their lives. You enter the water from a wooden dock at the edge of the lake after hiking through dense tropical forest along a rocky trail that climbs over a limestone ridge before descending steeply to the water. The lake surface is calm and warm. The water is slightly murky with a greenish tint from the algae and dissolved organic material. For the first few meters, there may be only a handful of jellyfish visible, small ones drifting lazily near the edges. But as you swim further from the shore toward the center of the lake, the density increases, gradually at first, and then suddenly overwhelmingly. They are everywhere. Above you, below you, beside you. Pulsing gently in every direction. Golden and translucent with 4 distinct horseshoe-shaped markings visible through their bells, which are the gonads, the reproductive organs that give the jellyfish their characteristic pattern. They bump against your chest, your arms, your legs with a soft, gentle pressure that feels like being nudged by a water balloon. There is no sting, no pain, no discomfort. Just the strange, intimate sensation of being surrounded by millions of living things that mean you no harm. Snorkelers often describe a feeling of profound peace, of being accepted into a world that operates on entirely different principles than the one they are used to. Of floating weightless in warm water, surrounded by creatures that have been doing this same thing in this same place, following this same sun for 12,000 years without interruption, without variation, without any awareness that the rest of the world exists. The future of Jellyfish Lake is uncertain in ways that are both specific and general. The specific threats are well documented. Climate change poses a direct risk to the zooxanthellae that sustain the jellyfish as demonstrated by the population crashes of 1998 and 2016. Rising ocean temperatures could destabilize the thermal balance of the lake, making it uninhabitable for the algae and, by extension, for the jellyfish themselves. Changes in rainfall patterns could alter the freshwater input to the lake, affecting its salinity and stratification. Ocean acidification could change the chemistry of the seawater that seeps through the limestone tunnels, altering the mineral composition of the lake water in ways that are difficult to predict. Tourism, while carefully managed, still poses risks. Sunscreen chemicals washed off the bodies of snorkelers can accumulate in the lake water over time. Physical contact with the jellyfish, while harmless to the swimmers, can damage the delicate bell tissue of the animals. The sheer number of visitors creates a cumulative disturbance that is difficult to quantify but impossible to dismiss. The general threats are even more concerning because they are less controllable. Jellyfish Lake exists in a world that is changing faster than at any point in the past 12,000 years. The conditions that created the lake and that have sustained its ecosystem since the end of the last ice age are products of a climate system that is now being fundamentally altered by human activity. The golden jellyfish evolved to thrive in a very specific set of conditions: temperature within a narrow range, salinity within a narrow range, nutrient availability within a narrow range, light exposure following predictable seasonal patterns. If any of these parameters shift beyond the tolerance of the jellyfish or their zooxanthellae, the consequences could be swift and irreversible. There is no backup population to draw from. There is no captive breeding program that could recreate the conditions of the lake in a laboratory. The golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake are a one-of-a-kind product of 12,000 years of evolution in isolation. And if they are lost forever. And yet, there is reason for cautious hope. The Palau government has demonstrated a genuine commitment to protecting its marine environments, including Jellyfish Lake. In 2015, Palau established one of the largest marine sanctuaries in the world, covering roughly 500,000 square kilometers of ocean. The management of Jellyfish Lake itself has become increasingly sophisticated with monitoring programs that track jellyfish populations, water chemistry, and visitor impacts on a regular basis. The willingness to close the lake entirely when the jellyfish population was at risk, as happened in 2016, demonstrates that the authorities are prepared to prioritize conservation over revenue when necessary. Local communities have embraced the lake as a source of pride and identity, not just as an economic asset, but as a natural treasure that belongs to Palau and to the world. There is a growing awareness that places like Jellyfish Lake are irreplaceable, that once they're gone, no amount of money or technology or good intentions can bring them back, and that the responsibility to protect them falls on everyone, not just the people who happen to live nearby. Right now, at this very moment, 5 million golden jellyfish are moving through the warm waters of a hidden lake in the rock islands of Palau. They are following the sun, as they have every single day for 12,000 years. They are pulsing gently through water that glows green and gold in the tropical light. They are carrying within their tissues millions of microscopic algae that are converting sunlight into energy, fueling a partnership that has outlasted civilizations, ice ages, and every catastrophe the planet has thrown at it. They have no brain, they have no eyes, they have no awareness of the world beyond the limestone walls of their lake. They do not know that they are unique. They do not know that they are beautiful. They do not know that people travel from the other side of the planet to float among them and weep at the strangeness and the gentleness of what they have become. They just pulse. They just drift. They just follow the light. 12,000 years ago, they were ordinary jellyfish trapped by rising seas in a limestone basin in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They had stings and predators and all the struggles of life in the open ocean. But the world changed around them. Their predators vanished. Their weapons became unnecessary. Their algae became their sustenance. And slowly, imperceptibly, one generation at a time, they became something else entirely. Something the world had never seen before. A jellyfish without a sting. A predator without prey. A creature powered by the sun, swimming through a hidden lake in a place most humans will never visit, following a light it cannot name, toward a destination it will never reach. And it has been doing this every single day without fail, for longer than human civilization has existed, long before the pyramids were built, long before the first city was founded, long before anyone was keeping track. 5 million golden jellyfish following the sun across a lake that the rest of the world forgot about. And they will keep doing it tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, for as long as the sun rises over the rock islands of Palau and the water stays warm and the light keeps coming through.